Welcome to the Dear NICU Mama podcast. Our mission is to connect the past and the present NICU mom by bringing them out of isolation and into a sisterhood of women who can stand alongside each other as we heal and grow both in and out of the NICU.
Our hope is that through interviews with trauma-informed medical and maternal mental health experts and vulnerable stories from NICU mamas themselves, that you would feel connected to the Dear NICU Mama sisterhood around the world. So, whether your NICU journey was 50 years ago,
or whether you find yourself in the NICU today, we hope that this podcast reminds you that you are not alone.
Hi, friends, and welcome back to the Dear NICU Mama podcast. It's your hosts, Martha and
Ashley.
Hi,
Good,
Ashley.
kind of fast today.
I was trying to do it slow. Okay.
It was like poppy. It was kind of like punchy.
Poop. Hi,
We were
see,
cheerleaders.
Yeah, hope time. Remember that? People of the world, spice up your life. Were Spice Girls around in your youth, Ashley? There's about just like 4 or 5, 8-year difference between. I don't know.
I mean, they were definitely around. You know my childhood. I didn't listen to Spice Girls, but they were around. They were a thing.
They were around. They still are. Ashley, how are you feeling today?
Good. I got my heating pad on, so we're thriving.
That's good. Okay. Well, good for taking care of and listening to your body. I celebrate you.
Thank you so much. I received that.
Thank you. Your whom says thank you. Well, friends, on today's episode, sometimes we have the pleasure of interviewing experts in the field of neonatology, maternal mental health, obstetrics, physical therapy to talk about all things NICU. And today we have the pleasure of interviewing a NICU mom just like you, a listener, to hear about her story as a NICU parent, about CHD. And also it's a doubly special for us because she's a member of our editorial team. It's Kamille. Oh my God. I just said Kamille. Who's Kamille?
Me.
It's a member of our editorial team, Kamille Daisel. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so finally happy to be here and meet with you girls.
This has been a long time coming. This has been a long time coming.
Yep.
We have talked about this episode since the conception of the podcast. We have been in love with you since the moment that we met you. I think if I'm remembering right, the first time we met you was a girls' night out event, was it not?
Yeah, and I think you'd only had maybe like 6 or like 5. Like it was pretty new. Like
it was
early.
Yes.
I consider myself an OG. Like
Oh,
you
definitely.
absolutely are an OG. 100%.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And you made this really beautiful
TikTok.
I don't know if it was TikTok. Did TikTok exist back then? It was some sort of
It
reel
was
or
a
something
TikTok.
like that. And it was so beautiful. And you've always been so vibrant and open and vulnerable to share about your experiences as a NICU parent and dealing with medical complexity and mental health. And it's just always been an honor to know you. And we were just talking about this. We've got to see you rock so many different types of hairstyles.
Yes.
yeah, that I feel like definitely goes with your seasons of life. If you're feeling
Yes,
really
this is
good
true.
or you're feeling really bad, one way or another, your hair's probably going to have a nice change.
100%. I love it. Well, if we have any listeners today tuning into the podcast for the very first time, we are in season 6 of the Dear NICU Mama podcast. We highly encourage you to go back to some of our earlier episodes just to get some more of the amazing mamas and providers that we've had on the podcast. But season 6 theme is all about growing our families after NICU. So this is a question that gets brought up a lot in our private Facebook group. Some of our most engaged posts on social media are about this topic. And we couldn't think of anybody better to have to share about her journey than Kamille. She is NICU mama to Owen, and then she courageously was pregnant with Luuk. And it's really exciting because we got to be a part of your pregnancy journey, Kamille. And I remember you telling us at Girls Night Out that you were expecting Luuk. And so it's really fun to just see how much you've grown and how your family has quite literally grown. But the ways that you've healed and given back to this community is pretty remarkable. So we are definitely going to have 2 parts to this episode. So part 1 is going to be all about Owen's journey and how he's doing today. And part 2 will be all about just kind of coming to that decision of having more kids and what it was like to be pregnant again after NICU. So Kamille, let's start at the very beginning. When did you find out that you were pregnant with sweet, sweet Owen?
I found out that I was pregnant with Owen. What's 9 months before January or before December? I found out pretty soon.
September?
Yeah, I guess it was September 2018, if I'm doing the math right. Yep, because he was born in 2019. Okay. And I found out, and we were super excited. My husband and I had sort of done, the whole, we got married, then we got a house, and then we got a dog, and then we had a baby. And so it just felt like our life was on a really good trajectory. And so it was really, really exciting news to have. And we were already so in love with each other and so in love with our future with this baby.
I love it. And how was your pregnancy overall with Owen? Was it considered a, quote, normal pregnancy? Was it ever considered a high-risk pregnancy? What was it like?
So the pregnancy itself was, pretty unremarkable compared to our diagnosis and our birth. It was, quote unquote, normal. I had, just the typical pregnancy symptoms. It was like, oh, this is the worst. I'm so nauseous in like the first trimester. And then there were just a couple times where it was like we were a little worried that my amniotic fluid was too high, but there was nothing that put me really in a high risk category personally. It was Owen that was high risk. So yeah, it was just going the normal, totally normal course. And I was sort of loving and hating every minute of the morning sickness. Because I thought that was going to be the worst of it, right?
Yeah.
I was like, the worst of it is going to be me throwing up. And then the second part is going to be me walking around like a walrus. But there were things that happened in between.
Yeah, of course. And what did you know about the NICU before Owen's journey? Did you know anybody who had been in the NICU or had any complications?
No one personally. I didn't know anyone personally that had NICU experience or any sort of complications with birth. I was really also sort of the first one in my friend group to be pregnant and have kids. So there wasn't a lot of, there weren't a lot of references. So even in my family, we're really small and I'm the only granddaughter. So it was just me really as like the only primary experience. Yeah. So I didn't know anyone. And what I did know of the NICU, in my ignorance, it just seemed like it was very reserved for premature babies. I didn't know that it could also include many other sorts of kids with sicknesses. Right. I didn't know there were different levels to it, for instance. Yeah. So it all came really quick. I had a crash course in what the NICU would be like.
Yeah. And you alluded to it a little bit that the high risk necessarily wasn't surrounding your body and your experience, but more about Owen. So when did it take a turn? Was there an appointment where the doctors discovered something or started talking with you about him?
Yeah, we discovered that Owen was going to be a very special pregnancy and a very special child when he was born, because at our 20-week anatomy scan, we found out that he had congenital diaphragmatic hernia, CDH for short. And it was a term I'd never heard before. It was crazy because we were going to find out the gender. Like my husband and I, we can't wait for surprises. Like we needed to know right then. And so we had like all of our family sort of on call, and we'd text them and said like, okay, our appointment is coming up. It's only going to be an hour because it's typically what it would be. And then an hour went by, 2 hours went by, 3 hours went by, and our family still hadn't heard from us. And so I think even they had started to be concerned about what was taking so long. And we found out just our sonographer was really awesome, and she was sweet. She told us, you know, that he was a boy first, and she joked with us, and we talked about things, and oh, look at this, look at his foot. Yeah, there's no denying he's a boy. Like he's very open about it. And then she never got quiet because she'd already known, and so she was ready to prepare us, I guess just by being friendly and happy first, giving us all the good news. And so I had asked her, you know, what happens if things don't look good? Like, what do you typically do? And I didn't expect for her to respond that, well, I do have some bad news for you. So she initially had said, you know, things, when things don't look great, you know, I talk to the doctor, and the doctor comes in, and, you know, they have a conversation about everything that's going on. And then that's when she led with, so I do have some bad news for you. And she told us, she's like, the doctor knows me well enough and knows that I know what I'm doing well enough that I can just go ahead and tell you, you know, his stomach's in his chest. And his intestines are in his chest. And yeah, the room got really, really, really quiet, really, really cold, and even darker pretty fast. So it was life-changing, definitely, in that moment, 20 weeks. So I say, like, you know, I've been having, like, Owen's 3 now, but it feels like I've been going through stuff for 4 years because I lost my pregnancy. Like, not lost my pregnancy, but I lost that experience of being pregnant in a traditional way that I had thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And how did you process when that first happened? Jacques was with you, right? You were together. But like you said, it was a longer appointment. So assuming the doctor came in and walked you through some things, how were you even digesting the information?
They left me on the table with the jelly still on my stomach. And I just remember how cold it was and then how numb it got. And the sonographer told me, you know, just keep it on because the doctor's probably going to want to come in and check it out herself. My husband, Jacques, I think he knew right away the severity of what we were being told. One of my coping mechanisms, which super not healthy, but I just kind of dissociate. And so it almost felt like I left my body, and that want that came in from the doctor to kind of tell us what CDH is and here are our options. And, you know, terminating the pregnancy was one of them. So we knew just how high risk this situation was, and that there were other options to do, like in utero, I think is what it's called, procedure that would help try and correct the CDH before he was born to try and give him a better fighting chance. So like you're getting thrown all this information, and I just remember the doctor saying, she put her hand on my knee and she said, it's not your fault. She's like, before you do anything else, before you leave here today, I just need you to know this is not your fault. And so I carry that with me today, especially in times of self-doubt and reflecting on maybe what I could have done differently. I still go back to her kind of holding me as the very first person to tell me it wasn't me.
Yeah. That's so special. So, Kamille, one thing I would love to know is you had mentioned that you had told family and friends that you were going into this 20-week anatomy scan. And, for many of us who've been in that situation where we received news that we weren't expecting, it's really difficult to explain it to other people when we're still trying to digest everything that we've just heard. So I'd love to hear from you of, when did you begin to tell family and friends that, okay, things aren't looking like we thought? Was it right away? Did you take a couple days?
For my immediate family, so for my in-laws and my mom, who was waiting on the other end of that 1 to 2 to 3 hour appointment, obviously we told them right away. Jacques called his parents and I called my mom. My mom's a nurse, so she took the information and went into nurse mode. So she started doing her research and looking through all of her books and reaching out to people that she'd known who may have dealt with CDH before. And then for Jacques' family, who doesn't have any sort of medical experience, we just gave them a link to CDH. I think it was Chop. Chop does a really good job with CDH patients. And we sent them a link and it had a video. And that was just the easiest way for us to share the news with them, because we weren't in the right place to explain everything. We were learning everything ourselves. So it would be a very, very, very long time before I could speak about what CDH is and what our experience was like, especially just because at that time we didn't know what his birth was going to be like. And we got that a lot. We just don't know until he's born. Yeah. For other friends and other family members, we waited a really, really long time. I think some of my coworkers figured out that something was going on because I was excited to share my pregnancy journey with them, especially for people who were thinking of getting pregnant or wanted to get pregnant. All of a sudden, I became a recluse and I didn't talk about it anymore. So it was a long time after that. I think, gosh, I don't know, like another two months before we actually sat down and said, hey, y'all, this is what's going on. And we really need some prayers and some just privacy, I think.
Yeah.
And what did your care look like? I assume even though there wasn't a lot that you could do, I assume there was more monitoring than you had anticipated going into that second half of your pregnancy.
Yeah, the monitoring came more towards the end of the pregnancy, around like 7-8 months. We did, and that was just we did a lot of echoes, a lot of echoes, because severe pulmonary hypertension was one of the really high risks of CDH. And so we did a lot of monitoring of his heart, making sure that his heart was still functioning and firing off on all cylinders. And then we did an MRI, which was insane, being 8 months pregnant with a huge belly. Sitting in this MRI for an hour.
Oh my God, how uncomfortable.
It was intense.
Yeah.
I listened to the shins. At least they gave me some headphones.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you want to listen to? And I was like, the shins radio. So that was nice. But that's sort of what the monitoring looked like. It was monitoring him. Not so much me.
Sure.
But just him. And really, like, the only other preparation we could do was research CDH, research where we wanted to deliver, do sort of this is best case scenario, this is best case scenario, as far as where we wanted to give birth. So we chose Texas Children's Hospital, did all their research, met with the team, fell in love with them, got up with the Ronald McDonald House. So I was just I was trying to plan out as best I could what giving birth was going to look like and give him the best odds, because I was completely out of control with what was actually going on with him.
Yeah. Right. Well, and I know we've talked about this a little bit before, Kamille, but the term like CHD is a little bit more commonplace or like maybe more familiar, but CDH isn't. So when you were doing your research, did you find that it was challenging to find a lot of information about it, or how was your experience of just researching it prior to his delivery?
I could definitely find information about CDH. What was challenging was finding people's experience with it. So of course we could find all the medical information, and I understood what it was. I was like, okay, his diaphragm wasn't completed. I get it.
Sure.
But I didn't. There's no way when you're researching to find out what your own child's odds are actually going to be when they're born. Yeah. And that was really, really hard, because that's what we were left with wondering was he going to survive? How long was he going to be in the NICU? What was it going to look like if he came home? There's so many unknowns when it comes to CDH that, to this day, I sometimes am left wondering, is this thing that's going on with him, is that because of CDH? Or, is he going to reherniate at some point? So doing the research for it, I could find, and then we started joining Facebook groups for support around CDH, and those people could share their experiences. But that was really hard because there was a lot of survival stories and, a lot of non-survival stories. And that was really, really difficult when we were getting so close to our due date. Right. So,
yeah. There was so much uncertainty with your pregnancy, and it sounds like you were really tactical in terms of, right, this is what I can do, so this is what I will do. But how did you manage or mitigate the stress and the mental health pressures that you were experiencing? And if you didn't, that's okay, because I didn't either. So
well, yeah, no, but I think the way that I managed it was by throwing myself into everything, into the research, into finding our care. I work in HR, so I'm like, how much leave do I have left? What are these resources that I could be?
I'm writing to my state senator now. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Why don't we get more than 12 weeks of maternity?
Yeah, especially knowing that your delivery and postpartum period would most definitely be very complex.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I think that's just what I did. I just tried to throw myself into everything to prepare for him. There really wasn't a lot of room for my mental health. I wouldn't honestly say until like 2 years after he was born. And then it seemed like it was time to focus on me. But like I said, for the first 3 years, because I include that pregnancy piece, it was all about him and trying to give him the best fighting chance.
Yeah. And that makes sense too. And in a way that is taking care of, you know what I mean? Surviving is was what you could do, and that's absolutely what your body needed to do. That makes sense.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So because the medical team then knew that a lot of this would be determined, or like, what kind of care he would need after he was born would be determined after delivery, was the NICU something that they talked with you about? Did they give you like a tour prior? I mean, what was kind of your introduction to the NICU?
Yes, I was given a tour of the NICU. We were sort of given a crash course on what was going to happen after Owen was born. Texas Children's was amazing in doing this, and I think it's because they didn't want us to have any sort of hospital, like administrative surprises, because CDH babies themselves are surprises. So they also just wanted to make sure that we knew what was going to happen at the hospital with the staff. So they walked us through everything from, we're going to induce you at 39 weeks, which is a whole other story. And then there was going to be about 20 people in the delivery room, not for me, for Owen. And there's like this huge spaceship, that's what they called it, which is this huge machine that's essentially life support. He was going to be intubated right away, wouldn't get to see him, wouldn't get to hold him. They prepared me for all of those things, which didn't make it easier at all, but at least I knew. And so they told me all of this. They walked us through the level 4 NICU. They told us he's going to be in level 4. Other CDH kids had a very specialized sort of care in that they had a team with them from the moment they're born to the moment they're discharged. That's not always the case, I guess. But they were given a number, or they were given a color. And so he was the orange team. And so he had the same doctors and nurses for his entire NICU journey, his entire stay there. And so that was comforting. I didn't have to worry about getting to know a new nurse or a new doctor or having to explain it all over again, because you know how that can be, having to explain the same diagnosis again and again. They already knew it and they knew what to do with him, so I didn't have to worry about that. So they did a really good job at trying to prepare us as parents as best they could, given the circumstance, I think.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you were aiming for a 39-week induction. Is that what happened?
Yes. we got to 39 weeks and 26 hours of labor, where Owen would not let me lay on my left side. I was stuck to my right side, or else his heart rate would drop. So 26 hours on the same side. The care, again, that was like I received was definitely not the top level of care that he would receive, which is, it's fine because I would do it all over again to put him back to where he was. But it ended up with an emergency C-section. They popped my water, like my water broke. They did it, and then I was still going through the whole process for like another 16 hours. So I was turning septic. So they finally whisked me off to the emergency C-section operating room. And we went from there. It was a whirlwind.
Yeah. So, I mean, after 26 hours, that's exhausting. Were you awake during the C-section?
I was.
Jacques with you? Okay.
He was.
Yep.
Yeah, so I was awake during the C-section. Jacques was right there with me. I had a really great anesthesiologist who she was really good at making sure like I was still present. And so I remember the moment that Owen was born, and I looked at Jacques and I was like, he's here, because I could feel that relief.
Yeah.
And then they took Owen over to go do his thing to get intubated and all that stuff. And then they came to Jacques and they're like, Dad, it's time to go. And I guess I was squeezing Jacques' hand. Like I remember thinking like, okay, go, like go with him, like leave. But I guess I was squeezing his hand so tight that Jacques looked at the anesthesiologist and she's like, don't worry, I'm going to knock her out. And so she did. So I was present up until that moment. And then, I don't know, I was at a carnival. It was like Dumbo. It was terrifying, but
Oh my God.
at least I was knocked out.
Oh man, I think that it just depicts too, just like how our partners feel so torn in that moment, because of course as moms, and we're like, go to the baby, but yet we also like want them and they want to be in both places at one time. And it's kind of like that hand grip is kind of like the perfect illustration of like them being torn in two places, their two worlds now being torn in two places. And so your sweet, sweet husband.
Yeah.
A gem.
Yeah, that was hard for sure.
So Owen is born. The moment that is just, you guys have been literally waiting for this whole pregnancy because it's a determining factor for so many different things of his life. When was the first time that you met Owen, and how was he doing when you met him?
Okay, y'all are gonna get so mad at why I didn't get to see him when I wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't get to see him for the first 24 hours. And it's because I wouldn't pee. Like,
What?
it seems so stupid, but I had, sorry, I don't know if I can say stupid, but it was. But
Of
like,
course.
I had a catheter, and so they were trying to make me go to the bathroom, and I couldn't go. And I promise it's because I was so freaking stressed, right? Like, I just want to go see my kid. I just went through this like traumatic experience to go into another traumatic experience. Like, I cannot pee right now. And like, this nurse was like, well, we can't let you go anywhere. I was like, just give me the straight catheter. Like, just let me go.
Oh.
So finally, they're like, okay. Like, my mom, my little like nurse pit bull. Yeah. She like, the amount of times like she like followed a nurse outside the door to go and like have a word with them was a lot. But needless to say, I was fine. And then I went to go and see him for the first time. And he was stable. He was sleeping. Now, of course, he had way more drugs than I have ever had in his system. I think more than most people. And he was so small, but he was so puffy. I remember that. And when I think back on it, it feels so quiet. Like, obviously it wasn't quiet, like, the sound of a NICU and all the monitors going off and people talking, and just, it's such a loud and noisy place. Yeah. But when I think about it, and I think about my time with him in that very dark room, it just felt so quiet. So it was really, really hard. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, it wasn't a beautiful moment to me. It wasn't a relief. It was just very sort of dissociating. Like, I was there, but I wasn't there. I was happy that, he'd made it, and, he was getting the treatment that he needed, but I didn't know what to do. Like, I was stuck. I didn't know what else I could do. Yeah. Because he wasn't inside my stomach anymore. Mm-hmm. He was sort of on his own, and he was going to have to fight on his own, and he was going to have to, fight with the doctors and, fight with God. So it was just a very isolating experience to be left alone in this quiet room with your baby who's basically on life support. Yeah. It wasn't ECMO, but
yeah. And I mean, when you came in and you met him for the first time, what did you know about his condition, right? Because with CDH, there's such a wide range of possibilities, right, for his status. How was that explained to you?
It was explained the way that it was before he was born. So they had sort of predicted how he would be. They predicted he would have severe pulmonary hypertension. Mm-hmm. It was confirmed. He did. They weren't sure how long his journey in the NICU would be. Mm-hmm. It was hard for them to gauge because he still needed to have his repair surgery. So that was the big part, was we needed to get past this surgery that he needed to have to move his stomach back down, his intestines back down, and close up his diaphragm. And then that would have given us a better idea to see his lung growth, see how much lung he had, and how his heart and his lungs would function. So I didn't know much. I didn't know what to ask either. Yeah. So that was hard. I didn't know what to ask. And I didn't quite understand what I was being told.
Yeah. I mean, incredibly overwhelming because you were also septic too. Hey, sepsis twins, cute. But that is also a very a severe critical place for you to be, and it takes a while for your body to beat that infection and be well. So
Yeah.
I imagine that was also hard because you were also healing and not feeling yourself at all.
Well, it's crazy because we're going to talk about, Luuk later, but when I compare the two pregnancies with Owen, I was in a wheelchair for about 2 weeks. And so they would literally, my husband would just roll me up to the NICU and then I would roll right next to his bed.
Yep.
And that's how it was because it did take me so much longer to heal. And then with Luuk, I also had an emergency C-section. I was walking the same day.
Oh my God.
Like, yeah.
I have
It's just, I think,
so many similarities, Kamille. That's so crazy. We had to
Yeah.
rent a wheelchair because I was like, I cannot move.
yeah, exactly.
It's
So,
it's wild. It's wild.
It's something.
Yeah.
But I think just like your body takes so much time to heal, but that coupled with the traumatic, like the trauma of your child being in the NICU just takes so much longer.
Oh, and then the frustration too of like, now I have to wait for someone to push me up, and then don't design hand washing stations for people who have to operate wheelchairs and all that stuff too. It adds a layer to frustration to like, I need to heal so that I can be there for my baby. Yeah. And the surgery, how soon after his delivery were they able to do the surgery or talk about it even?
We were in the hospital over Christmas, so over the holidays. So Owen was born on the 23rd. He should have had his procedure on the 25th, but it was Christmas, so it was postponed until the 26th. So he was 4 days old. Yeah. And yeah, he was 4 days old, and he had bedside surgery. And it's crazy because they close off the NICU, and you guys might have experience with that, but they close off the entire NICU, which is so like, also just like having the NICU closed and then being a parent and not being able to access your kid is so challenging and so almost debilitating with like anxiety. So when Owen had his NICU station closed off, and then another kid would have a NICU station closed off later, I sort of realized like the severity, like it's okay, like Owen's going to be fine. You know, the parents of this other kid that's closing off the NICU, like they need this. So I don't know, that was just something that I just thought about. But yeah, so he had bedside surgery, closed off the NICU, and then about 5 hours later, I think they came out of it. And I was still in the hospital because I was still recovering. And our doctor, Dr. Vogel, he came directly to my room, actually. Like he came to my hospital room and sat with me and let us know how Owen did and said he was a total rock star. He gave him no complications. And he was really, really excited that his diaphragm, like he had enough diaphragm to close organically and not with any sort of mesh, which is sometimes what they have to do. So he was really, really excited about that. And yeah, so it was very successful, and we were very, very fortunate in that.
So after his surgery then, did that kind of set the tone for the rest of your NICU stay with him? Did he have any other surgeries or triumphs and setbacks that kind of determined how his NICU stay was?
It did set the tone. He was a rock star throughout it. He really surprised everyone. He surprised all of the doctors and all the nurses by just how well he was doing. Of course, in the NICU with these kids, it's always one step forward, two step back, and it's kind of a dance that we do for a while. But finally, he just kept fighting. He was fighting so hard. He, was extubated. And then he was put on a CPAP, and then he moved to room air. Like they didn't do a nasal cannula or anything. He just moved straight to room air, and he did really good. And then he still had his NG tube in. We were about to go home with an NG tube and get, the sort of lowdown on how that was going to go at home. But he ripped it out. And we were like, okay, well, let's just see how he feeds. And he did okay. So they're like, he's going to feed a little better when he comes home. So why don't we just keep it out and see how he does? So yeah, of course there's always hiccups, but he still came home, which was the end goal.
Yeah. Right. And so how long was his NICU stay in total then?
It was 23 days.
Wow. That's a lot to happen in 23 days.
Yeah. Seriously.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Yeah, they when they were preparing us for everything, they were like, 6 to 8 weeks at minimum. That's kind of typical for CDHers. But then he was gone a little over 3 weeks. So he was absolutely amazing, and they were so happy for him.
That's amazing. What a little rock star. That is remarkable. It's like a major life surgery. And then all right, Mom, Dad, let's go home. Like, what?
I know, really. Now let's go drive you nuts at home during a pandemic.
Right.
I mean, I think that also kind of, obviously it was a positive outcome for the surgery and for his complications and his conditions. But kind of whiplash for you guys too, because your mind, it's almost like Doctor Strange in the multiverse, right? You kind of live all of these different experiences. You project and kind of see to the end all the different possibilities. And then you get to one, he does so beautifully and fights so hard through the ups and downs of the NICU. But then you and Jock are kind of still holding on to each other. Like, what do we just do?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's crazy just because, I talk about it all the time, is there's no one prepares you for life after the NICU. Those moments when you get home, especially after going through this trauma and bringing home a complex kid. And so it was just like we hopped onto another train, when we got home. So we're on this bullet train going through the pregnancy, and then we're on this other bullet train going through the hospital stay and the surgery. And then we're on this other bullet train when you come home and you're like, oh my gosh, why is he screaming? He's going to reherniate. What about his pulmonary hypertension? Is his heart going to blow up? Why are we yelling at each other? So it's definitely a wild, wild ride with many different endings to each chapter. I'm not sure how to explain that part.
Yeah.
Well, and you kind of mentioned earlier that you said you didn't really begin to process and heal from your journey 2 years later. Mm-hmm. So can we chat a little bit about, what it was like when you first came home and, when you felt safe enough to really begin to process everything that you had gone through?
When we came home, we were already very familiar with the word quarantine. It was sort of hammered into us in the NICU. Our doctors and our nurses kept saying, when you go home, you really need to quarantine. You need to make sure if you have any visitors, they're washing their hands, sanitizing. So we actually went out and we bought hand pumps, and we had hand pumps all over our house.
That's so cute.
And we weren't even having visitors come over, right? And then a month later, the pandemic hits. And so we could have sold that hand soap on black market. It was we were the only ones who had this. So we were already so familiar with the word quarantine, and then it happened in real life for everyone. And so it might sound terrible to someone who didn't go through this, but maybe y'all would understand it, is it was almost a bit of a relief to not have to not have to tell someone why they can't come over. It was oh, no one can come over because COVID is a thing and that's dangerous for everyone. But I didn't have to explain to someone CDH is this, and you know, germs can do this to him, and we don't want to go back to the hospital. We don't want to go through all this again. Because not everyone gets it, or maybe that don't get it, but they just, it's too personal. When you tell someone they can't come over, that's personal, even if it's not. It's just taken personally. So I will say that the first year, and then I say like the first 2 years, was extremely challenging. I had severe postpartum depression. At one point, you know, my psychiatrist was like, I am this close to committing you because I was so depressed and I was so anxious. And there were times where I wouldn't get out of bed for 4 days. And so Jacques had to take care of everything. I was not myself. I'm not the, you know, bubbly cherry person that y'all called out in the beginning of the podcast. Like it was just a very different version of myself. And there was one point where I didn't think I would ever drive again. Like I could not get in the car without having a meltdown and just crying hysterically. So I didn't think I was ever going to drive again. And then maybe a year and a half later, I started to open up a little bit more. We started going to the parks. I think that's where we started. We needed fresh air. So we started going out to the parks and we socially distanced, going to the grocery store. And then it sort of just turned into, this isn't about me anymore and my anxiety and my depression. This is really about Owen and what he needs to thrive in this world. And taking a note from him, like letting him lead us for what he needed and what he wanted. So if he wanted to be more engaged with what was going on outside, okay, well, let's find ways for him to go do that. So he's just taught me so much, and he sort of led me in my own healing just by showing me that he can thrive without me having to keep him in the house and keep him with me all the time. You know, he can experience these things that I was so scared of, and he can be okay. And so that just sort of opened the door to more and more experiences for him and for us.
Thank you so much for sharing that so vulnerably, Kamille. I think it's kind of scary to say these things out loud for us, or we're conditioned to, like, and it's a really awful feeling when you have what you imagine your heart's desire to be, which to have the baby that you really fought really hard for home, but then to have your mind respond in a way that is the opposite of what you would imagine. Although we do know that it makes a lot of sense. You had been through quite a lot, right? So even to share that, you know, maybe in-person, inpatient care was something that was maybe considered for you too. There's sometimes so much shame and stigma around it, but the reality of it is that you carried the burden of 2 lives pretty courageously for many years, right? And then navigated a global pandemic, the panorama, as we call it.
Yeah.
Like a month later, right? And so the fact that you navigated it and are still here standing today is only a testament to your strength and not any bit of weakness, right? I remember thinking that about you when I first met you too, because I think knowing now, even then you were suffering quite a lot, but the way you presented yourself was with such transparency. And I know that what you share today is going to make all the difference for somebody else going through it right now.
Oh, thanks for saying that. I really appreciate it. I don't know. I think I didn't realize how bad PTSD, but postpartum depression was. I didn't know anger was a part of it. And so I felt very alone in it. And then I discovered y'all, and there were other moms who were going through similar experiences, but they, for rightful reasons, they were anonymous. They were scared to talk about it. So I thought maybe if I put my face to it, it's not so scary to talk about. At least that's the reason that I put my face out there. Like, just so you know, this is what it looks like. Aw, thanks, girl.
Well, and I remember too, because we had the chance to get to know you so well through the girls' night outs, like I feel like we were so fortunate with the moms like you who first joined this community because it set the tone for everything. Like the way that you were vulnerable, the way that team members that are now team members like Vilma were vulnerable, truly made other moms feel like they could be. And so I really attribute like your guys' vulnerability to the beautiful sisterhood that we have today because it created a safe space. And so I will be forever grateful that we got the chance to get to be a part of those moments because it changed everything for this community. So we talk about it all the time.
Oh, stop, y'all. Like, there wouldn't be this community of women if it wasn't for y'all. Like,
but seriously, you guys are what make it special, truly.
We're just the authors that filled out the paperwork. That's all that it was. But I think
y'all do the hard work. We just like share our stories and sob.
I think the cool thing too, I'm sure if you follow Dear NICU Mama on social media, Kamille has been behind some incredible pieces of writing, but also some really fun, I know it sounds weird to say fun, but some really delightful and poignant and lovely reels and videos about mental health and intrusive thoughts, and in such a real way, but also in a way that feels light, because like adding that bit of levity to it makes it less scary too. And I've always admired that about you too. I feel like it's so funny. Anytime we do a live event or something, you always are posting things in the chat that make me laugh out loud and distract me from like the teleprompter and stuff. But
you're welcome. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm what do you call those people? In a comedy show, I'm a heckler.
Oh, a heckler, yes. You can heckle me any day. I would love that.
You can take it.
I love it. Well, before we get to the very closing question, can you tell us a little bit about how Owen is thriving today? How is he doing? Such a little miracle boy in his Spider-Man costumes.
He's so
Oh my gosh, cute. I know. He still wears his Spider-Man costumes, and we got that in the beginning of October, y'all. Like,
oh my gosh.
And he wears it at least 4 times a week. Like, he doesn't wear it to school. Like, he doesn't wear it to daycare because he's proper like that apparently. But yeah, okay, that's a side note. But he's amazing. I am so proud of him, and I love seeing him grow and thrive and just like become his own person, and just his own little personality. He's a Capricorn. He's like me. I mean, my birthday is December 27th, so we are both Capricorns, and I can see that because he likes to have things a little bit in order. But he's just so much fun, and we've had our challenges as far as current respiratory infections, especially I guess last year. We had a stint in the hospital because he had RSV and pneumonia. But it's we're really lucky to have an outpatient team for CDH, and they're actually the same people who were there for him in the hospital. So we have the same pulmonologist, and we have the same CDH nurse who follows him every 6 months. And so it's great because if anything does ever come up, we can talk about it and we can brainstorm together. And they never shut me down as a mom who's concerned about this, his finger looks funny. That's not ever come up. But like they would be like, okay, Kamille, like, let's look at this. But, it came up recently that he's aspirating. And so that's a huge, big, scary word, especially in the NICU. That's one of the sort of things they hammer into your head, check for signs of aspirating, bring him immediately to the hospital. But he was silently aspirating, and we found that out through a swallow study. and then an endoscopy or triple scope. They found out he had like this laryngeal cleft, and they closed it. And we just had another swallow study, and he is not aspirating. Yay! I know. So we're in speech therapy. He has asthma, but I mean, all in all, like he's a totally just a kid. Like you would never know his history. You would never know that, you know, he was fighting for his life at some point. But I think it's just the fact that he did is such a testament to who he is now. And just how strong he is and how brave he is. He loves the doctors. Oh my gosh. Jock had a cut the other day and he was like, Daddy, you have a cut. I'll go get a Band-Aid. And like he like ran as fast as Spider-Man to the other room to go get a Band-Aid.
As fast as Spider-Man.
So yeah, so he's doing really, really, really great. So thank you for asking.
Oh, girl. It's so fun to see him thriving and see you thriving as a family. And
Thank you.
You guys make like everyday, ordinary things feel like so special. And like, I just want to go spend a day in your house and just like be a part of the party.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Please do. Like it's, yes, it's quiet out here in the country. We have some cows.
Oh my gosh.
So you guys can. Well, we're gonna get chickens too, so it'll get busy.
Martha's dream.
Oh God, I want silky chickens so bad.
I do too.
Oh, they're so cute. Everybody Google silky chickens right now, and I want to name them after the Supreme Court justices.
Oh,
wouldn't that be funny? You'd be like,
that would be really
Justice
good.
Sonia Sotomayor, come here. You know what I mean? Like sort of. I don't know. Something about that. I get. Anyway, that's so wonderful. And your little babies are so like cherubic. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but they're just something about their chins just is so cute. Gosh darn it.
Oh, thank you. I like their chins too.
They're so freaking cute.
They're good brothers. They're really, really great brothers. I'm proud of them. Owen's a really good brother too. So
that's so
well,
cool.
I'm excited to hear more about that in part 2 of your story. As a way to kind of close out, we always like to ask our moms kind of what words of encouragement or hope they would leave to NICU moms listening. So kind of looking at your story, I'd love to know, like, what's a word of hope or encouragement that you would give to a NICU mom who's also in that high-risk pregnancy, just kind of waiting period. You're just kind of waiting it out, riding it out. You know, what words of hope would you offer them?
I think something I would tell moms who are in the waiting period after, you know, maybe finding out that their child has a genetic something, or, you know, they're like you said, they're just in that waiting period of giving birth. I would say to trust your instinct. I don't know, like just to trust your instinct and your feelings and know that they're validated. Like, don't forget that, yes, in this time, everything is about baby and making sure everything goes smoothly for baby. And it's so, so scary because the doctors and everybody is consumed by your child, and so are you. But don't forget to give yourself some grace and to trust yourself that you can make the right decisions and that you did everything that you could, and that it's okay to be scared and to feel things. Because I know for me, I just felt so dissociated that I didn't want to feel anything, but it's totally okay to feel things. I hate saying it'll be okay, but it will, you know?
Beautiful. Well, Kamille, we love you so much. You are such a gift to this community. It truly has been a joy to know you for these years now and see Owen grow up and see the ways that you are flourishing and thriving today. And we will definitely be back for part 2 to hear about pregnancy after NICU and what it was like to kind of be in that pause and wait again after your experience. And so we're very excited for part 2. But to all of our NICU moms listening, we just, like always, want to thank you for being here and a part of this community and for holding space for all of these remarkable stories and mothers. It truly is such a gift and a joy to do this with all of you. And if you hear one thing today, we hope that we can be like the sonographer. Is that right? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, I think so.
Tech?
Yeah.
I already asked them before I recorded this if that was the right term. But that we can be who the sonographer was to Kamille and just look at you and tell you that this was not your fault. That everything that your baby endured was not your fault. In fact, you, no matter the circumstances, no matter what you faced, you stood up every single day or wheeled into that NICU room with courage and immense amount of bravery. And so we love you all. We are so grateful for this community and this sisterhood. Kamille, thank you so much for sharing your story so vulnerably. We can't wait to be back for part 2, but mamas, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Dear NICU Mama podcast.
If you loved this episode, we'd be so grateful for a review on any of the podcast platforms.
And we'd love to continue connecting with you via our social media pages or a private Facebook group. And ultimately, NICU Mama, welcome to the sisterhood.